Mara did not cry when they put the crown flowers in her hair. She stood in the center of the choosing circle, 40 women around her, the Alpha King somewhere at the front of the crowd. She kept her eyes low. She kept her spine straight. When his voice said her name, she did not flinch. She simply lifted her chin, the way her mother had taught her to accept things that could not be refused. The applause was loud. It sounded like a door closing. The palace was beautiful. That was the first thing she noticed, and the last thing she trusted. Everything inside it was made to impress. High ceilings, stone floors so polished she could see her own face in them, windows that caught the evening light and threw gold across every room. Mara walked through it on her first day and learned the shape of it the way you learn a place you might one day need to leave quickly. She noted the doors, the guards, the hours they changed positions. Cassian, the Alpha King, was not what she expected. She had expected coldness. What she got was something harder to name. A man who was civil at dinner, distant at all other times, and almost never looked at her directly. He was tall. He had the kind of stillness that powerful people develop when they no longer need to prove anything to anyone. He expected her presence at meals and her absence everywhere else. She gave him exactly that, and nothing more. There were rules she learned in her first week: where to sit during formal dinners, when to speak and when to stay quiet, how to hold a glass so that her fingers didn't show tension. She mastered every rule in 7 days. She hated how easily she mastered them. She started spending her mornings in the courtyard with his hunting dogs. They were large, quiet animals who leaned against her legs and asked nothing of her. She found this more comforting than she expected. One of them, a gray one with a torn ear, followed her everywhere after the 3rd day. She did not name him. She told herself she would not name him. She called him Gray. 33 days into the palace, she went looking for Gray and found herself in the wrong corridor. The study door was open. She looked in, only because she could hear Gray's breathing from inside. He was asleep in the corner by the fire, completely unbothered by rules or dignity, or the fact that he was sleeping on what appeared to be an extremely expensive rug. She stepped inside to collect him, and then she saw the map on Cassian's desk. It was large, laid flat, held down at the corners by small stone weights. She recognized the shape of it immediately: the border territories, the river lines, the packlands she had grown up inside. She recognized every boundary, including the one around her mother's village. There was writing across it, formal language, transfer terms, her mother's land, her father's grave, the hill where she had learned to run in her wolf form at age 6, all of it outlined in ink, with Cassian's seal already pressed into the wax at the bottom. She stood very still for a long time. Then she picked up Gray, tucked him under her arm, and walked back to her room. She did not run. Running would have looked like panic. Panic was something she could not afford. She sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet and thought about what she had seen. She thought about it very carefully, the way you examine something sharp before you decide what to do with it. By the time the palace went dark, she had made her decision. She left 3 hours before dawn. No letter, no ceremony. She took the clothes on her back, the map she had memorized line by line, and Gray, not out of any emotional attachment, she told herself, which was almost entirely untrue. She cleared the eastern wall without a sound. The palace lights stayed on behind her the whole time. She did not look back, not because she wasn't tempted, but because looking back was a thing she had decided not to do, and once she decided something, that was generally the end of it. The night was cold and very clear. She ran until the palace was gone from the skyline, and then she kept running. The borderlands were nothing like the palace. They were rough and cold and full of people who had been pushed out of better places, omega wolves without packs, families who had lost territory disputes, a few former palace servants who had made small mistakes that cost them everything. They lived in clusters near the tree lines, in camps that were always one hard winter away from collapse. Mara arrived with a dog and no explanation. She did not announce herself. She did not tell anyone who she was or where she had come from. She simply looked at what needed fixing and fixed it. A camp elder had a water line that had been leaking for 2 months. She fixed it in an afternoon. 2 neighboring camp leaders had been fighting over shared hunting ground since before she arrived. She sat between them one evening and said very little. But what she said apparently mattered, because by the end of the night, they had agreed to split the ground evenly and stop speaking to each other through intermediaries. People began coming to her with problems. She began solving them. Nobody used the word leader. She didn't need them to. The first person who swore loyalty to her was a woman named Hessa. Hessa arrived at Mara's fire one night with 3 cracked ribs and a story Mara recognized from other people's mouths. Mara said nothing. She set the ribs with practiced hands. Her mother had been a healer, one of the useful inheritances, and wrapped them tight while Hessa breathed carefully through the pain. When it was done, Hessa looked at her and said, "Are you building a pack?" Mara thought about the question seriously. She looked at Gray, who was asleep again, completely relaxed, dreaming about whatever dogs dream about. "Looks like it," she said. Hessa placed her hand over her heart and swore right there, in the firelight, ribs still healing. It was the most unadorned ceremony Mara had ever witnessed. She preferred it to every formal event she had attended in the palace. Over the next year, more came. They came because they had nowhere else to go, and then they stayed because Mara turned out to be someone worth staying near. She was not warm in the way that invites comfort. She was warm in the way that invites trust, which is a different and rarer thing. She made no promises she could not keep. She never raised her voice. She solved problems efficiently and buried the unsolvable ones under enough work that they eventually stopped mattering. The pack grew. 3 winters passed. They were not easy winters. There were 2 failed harvests, 1 ambush by a territorial pack that left 4 of her wolves injured, and 1 funeral. The funeral was the hardest thing she had done since leaving the palace. She buried him herself. She stood at the grave for a long time and waited for the right words to come. They didn't. She walked away from the grave and built a stronger perimeter the next morning. Her pack watched her do it and understood. That was her way of grieving. Not silence, but usefulness. They followed her lead. It was the most honest tribute she knew how to offer. In the 3rd year, a coalition of mid-tier alpha leaders sent representatives to her camp with a formal offer. They had heard about her. They wanted to absorb her pack into their alliance, bring her people under their banner, give them protection and resources and official standing. All she had to do was accept their authority. She read the offer twice. She sent back a counteroffer. Any of them were welcome to petition to join her alliance instead. 3 of them said yes. The summit notice arrived in early autumn, carried by a palace messenger who looked slightly alarmed by the number of wolves standing silently behind Mara when he found her. The Alpha King was calling a summit of Alpha Councils. All recognized pack leaders were expected to attend. Mara's name appeared on the list because 3 separate packs had registered her as their alpha, which meant, by the old laws, she had full standing at the table. She read the letter once. "Tell him I'll be there," she said. "Tell him I'm bringing my people." The messenger looked at her people, 47 wolves standing in clean formation in the autumn light, and wrote down what she said, without adding any comments of his own. She knew the palace road by heart. She knew the way the trees thinned before the first gate, the sound the gravel made under boots near the eastern entrance, the particular angle of the afternoon light on the courtyard stones. She had memorized this place when she lived inside it, and memory, she had found, did not ask permission before it arrived. She walked through the gates with her pack behind her and kept her face very still. Cassian was waiting in the entrance hall, not the throne room. She noticed that immediately. The throne room would have been a power statement. The entrance hall was something else, almost a concession, or as close to one as a man like him was capable of making. He looked older, not badly so, just like someone who had been carrying something heavy for 3 years. He looked at Gray first, Gray who was walking at her heel, who had been at her heel for 3 years. Gray looked at Cassian. Then Gray walked straight to him. Mara watched that happen with a completely neutral expression. It cost her something. She did not show that it cost her. The summit lasted 4 days. The council room was full of alpha leaders who were used to taking up space. Mara took up exactly as much space as she needed, and not 1 inch more. She listened more than she spoke. When she spoke, she was precise. She did not repeat herself. By the 2nd day, Cassian had deferred to her reading of a border dispute twice. The room noticed. She did not acknowledge it. She simply gave her assessment and moved to the next matter. By the fourth day, 3 other pack leaders were addressing questions to her before they addressed them to anyone else. She accepted this without any visible reaction. It was simply what happened when you built something real. He found her on the eastern wall on the last evening. She was standing where she had stood 3 years ago, looking at the same courtyard, breathing the same cold palace air. She heard him coming. She did not turn around. He stood beside her for a moment without speaking. The courtyard below was quiet. The evening was very clear. "The map," he said. "You saw it." "I saw it," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your mother's land was never going to be transferred. The motion came from the council. There was a faction pushing to absorb the border territories. I needed them to believe I was willing to consider it. I was not willing. I was building a case to block it permanently, and I needed time." Mara said nothing. She looked at the courtyard for a long time. He continued, carefully, "I should have told you. I did not know, at that point, how much you needed to know. That was a mistake." The night was very quiet. She thought about her father's grave, the hill where she first ran, her mother's kitchen, 3 winters, 1 funeral. 47 wolves who had walked through these gates behind her because they trusted her with their lives. She thought about Gray walking straight to him. She thought about the fact that none of this, not one piece of it, was simple. "I know," she said finally. Just that. 2 words. She pushed off the wall and started walking. Then she stopped. She did not turn around. "Your dog missed you," she said. She walked away from the wall, down the corridor, back to her people. She did not cry on the walk back. She was not unhappy. She was not happy either. She was something more honest than both. She was clear. Clear about what she had built. Clear about who she had become in the years between that courtyard and this one. The woman who had left this palace in the dark, with a dog and a memorized map and nothing else, was not the woman walking back through it now. That first woman had been chosen. This one had done the choosing. Her pack was waiting for her in the east courtyard, settled in easy formation, some of them talking quietly, some of them watching the gate. Hessa saw her coming and raised one hand in a small greeting. Gray trotted up and pressed his head against her knee. She looked at her people for a moment. "We leave at first light," she said. They nodded, no questions. She sat down among them, and Gray lay across her feet, and the palace rose tall and lit around the courtyard walls, and she was neither inside it nor outside it. She was exactly where she had decided to be. That, she had learned, was the only place worth standing.